Hi, I'm Owen Canfield from the opinion page here at the Oklahoman, joined as I am every Friday afternoon by Mike McNutt, our chief Capitol correspondent, to talk about the week that was at the state Capitol. Mike, good to have you here as always. I see you got the memo about the blue blazer and khakis. I'm glad you adhered to that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Not a terribly busy week at the Capitol this week, but there were some interesting items. Had a big tea party earlier in the week. People are riled up about the way the government is spending their money. Pretty good turnout, estimated at 5,000 or so. Talk about that a little bit. You were in the midst of it all.
Yeah, you mentioned it was on tax day, appropriately enough, April 15th, and quite a few people showed up, nearly 5,000 of the Highway Patrol estimates. And people were upset with their taxes. The main theme was upset with the federal government and spending out of control. Some of the bailouts especially that's gone on the past several months. Right. And although some were saying, they were upset with the President Obama. This all, in some can see, goes back to President Bush.
Sure. And
so they're really upset with the policy that seems to be in place for these bailouts for banks, the automakers, and of course the $787 billion bailout for state governments.
Well, I think it's been portrayed perhaps as a conservative movement, but I think you'd find a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, conservative or otherwise, who don't like the way things are being handled in Washington right now, the way the money's being spent. Did you sense that out there? Was it a bipartisan feel, or was it mostly a conservative-leaning group?
Well, I'd say probably most with a conservative. If you're going, it's hard to label people.
Sure.
But basically, people who want a balanced budget, who don't want big government, people who are just frustrated.
Yeah.
But all age groups. There were high school kids, college students, retirees, and then people who took off work. And they showed up, there's about 2,000 just before noon, and by 12:15, another couple thousand were able to get in.
Wow.
And it's the biggest crowd. The patrol says probably the biggest crowd in these kinds of rallies in several years.
Huh.
Biggest probably since the governor's inauguration.
Well, there's really something visceral about the whole money spending that's going on in Washington right now. I think it trickles down to everybody, and so that's what you saw this week.
Right, and taxes, people not paying their taxes.
Sure.
We talked about state and federal officials who've been late paying taxes or forgetting to pay their taxes, and people are wondering what their tax dollars, where they're going, and they just don't like the philosophy that the federal government is giving this to banks and to private companies, and then coming back and telling private companies how to run their business.
Right.
And
sure.
It's we saw some signs saying socialism, end socialism, and they just think that things are moving so quickly that they just want the government to take care of their main functions of defense and get the mail out.
Sure.
And, and let try to limit their spending.
Also this week, a new revenue estimate came out, or revenue numbers from the previous month. Not a good number, but not unexpected. It came in below the estimate, below a year ago. But Scott Meacham, the Treasury boss here in the state and Governor Henry's main budget man, seems to think we can make it through this fiscal year without having to cut jobs and furlough people. Is that right?
Yeah. It came in for the second straight month about 20% lower than the previous year.
Right.
As you say, they expected it because we're seeing the national recession, its effects coming in on Oklahoma. The hope is we still have a cushion of it because earlier on, because oil prices were high, remember those $4 a gallon days back in July?
Sure.
That was the beginning of the state's fiscal year. So gross production taxes, which was the state, just lives and dies still
really
by
drives
gross production
it,
taxes. With natural gas, especially oil in last summer, because from about July through October, gas prices were high, the state was able to collect quite a few of those taxes.
Right.
So we've got a cushion about $260 million, the state treasurer says, and if they're still expecting the next 3 months of our fiscal year, the last 3 months, to be down months.
Right,
It'll
sure.
be less than they were a year ago.
Sure.
But they're hoping, not for these 20% reductions, but that things won't be as bad.
Right.
And
the bad year is going to be next fiscal year.
Right,
apparently.
the next fiscal year.
That's
so
when folks are really concerned.
Yeah, they're pretty confident they want to cut jobs. If the money does come in lower than we estimated and we have on hand, then they'll have to basically just eliminate spending.
Right.
And cut some programs. But that's a dire situation that no one foresees occurring.
Right.
There's concern, obviously, anytime the revenue has been showing that pattern, but they're still hopeful.
Right.
Is the word the Treasurer uses, that they can get through June
this fiscal
30th,
year.
right, without with enough in the black it's going to be a squeaking by, I think.
Right. A couple bills signed this week. The governor signed a bill that would give drivers a 30-day grace period if their license expires. Much appreciated by the motorists out there. Right now, it's a nightmare because we've talked in the past about the immigration reform law passed in '07 that made that a real tough, much more difficult than it was previously. So he signed that. It was good to see. Signed a silver alert bill to help senior citizens. He signed a bill that would criminalize stem cell research in Oklahoma. We'll be interested to see what I'm sorry, he did not sign that. No, it's on his desk, right. and he's mulling that. Another issue that's been out there and continues to stick around: English only. Right. We're making English the official language. In a nutshell, where does that stand? There are a couple of measures out there that would propose to do that that would give the people the right to vote on whether they want English as the official language. Is that right?
Yes, and right now it's bottled up, to use an official legislative term. Because the committees have heard them, and they're pending getting scheduled on the floor. The House version of the Joint Resolution 1042 that Vandy Terrell, Representative Terrell, the main bill, passed the House by a wide margin, is passed the Senate committee, and is now waiting to be heard on the Senate floor. It's been there in that status for about 3 weeks.
Right.
Representative Terrell, a couple weeks ago, in a House committee, they took out the language of another bill and put in the same language as his original bill.
Right.
That would make English the official language for a vote of the people.
Right.
He put it in there, and it passed the committee, and it's waiting to be heard on the House floor. Then there's the Common English bill by Senator Anderson, and that bill passed the Senate and is waiting, and passed the House committee, and is now waiting to be scheduled on the House floor. So it's kind of a race. I think people are saying whichever bill, the Common English or official English, gets to the governor's desk, that gets heard first, has a better chance to get to the governor's desk. That's probably the bill that people will vote on.
Now, do the joint resolutions have to get the governor's signature?
No, that's right. It won't. So it's just a final. You're right. It's just a final race to the finish. You go to the Secretary of State, and she puts it on the ballot. The governor just schedules an election, probably November 2010.
But it's gone along a little bit more slowly, I think, than the backers of these resolutions would have hoped. They sort of thought it'd be a slam dunk, move it on, put it on the ballot in 2010, and that's not been the case.
Right, because there's leadership in both the Senate and the House kind of weighing their options about the implications of what English being an official language, what that does, versus common language.
Right.
And we talked about that before. And is it something with everything else that's going on, the budget crisis and some other needs that have to be made and addressed, is this something really they want to put out? So it's a leadership decision whenever that goes out on the floor, and we've heard it might be next week.
Great. Mike, thanks as always. Good to see you. And we appreciate you watching here on News OK TV, and ask you to keep reading each day in the Oklahoman.